What is the strangest thing you've ever seen? My roommate and I decided to head to the lake one hot day to cool off. As we arrived, we were in the parking lot, unloading our things from the car and preparing to go to the water. An older woman and what I assumed was her son approached us. They had been standing by their car while we were unloading, but had not gotten into their vehicle or taken anything out. They approached us quietly, which startled us when we turned around and saw them standing there. The older woman simply smiled and waved. Both my roommate and I asked if they needed any help, but the woman quietly replied no and continued to stare at us. Her companion, whom I guessed was in his late 30s or early 40s, then said she just wanted to say hi and waved at us himself. My roommate and I exchanged puzzled looks, and she responded with a tentative okay. Hi. The two continued to stand there, watching us. Feeling uncomfortable, we decided to walk away. As we did, they returned to their car and resumed standing by it. We moved to a nearby clearing and kept an eye on them, just in case they tried to tamper with our car. Eventually, they got into their vehicle and left, but the whole encounter left both of us bewildered. We walked to the water in silence, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. One summer day, my family and I were visiting the zoo when we came across a scene that caught everyone's attention. Down in the lion enclosure, there was a woman wearing a bright orange shirt with the words "Animal Abuser" printed in bold, capital letters on both sides. She was tasked with picking up lion dung, but what made it so shocking was that she was using only her hands, with nothing but a pair of thin gloves for protection, no scooper, no shovel, nothing else to help her. As we watched, it became clear that the task was taking a toll on her. She was gagging repeatedly, clearly struggling with the smell and the sheer unpleasantness of what she was doing. In the short time we stood there, she even threw up twice. The sight drew a crowd, with many people stopping to watch. Kids, curious and confused, were asking their parents why she was doing such a disgusting job with just her hands. The parents, in hushed tones, explained that the woman had abused animals, and this was her punishment. As more people gathered, a zookeeper walked by and noticed the growing crowd. He paused for a moment, then commented, "Yeah, she's not having much fun, is she? But she's really not going to like what comes next. After she's done out there, we're taking her back to the lion night house to clean it out once the lions have been let into the freshly cleaned enclosure. I've been doing this job for 8 years, and even I still gag in there sometimes. And at least I get to use a hose and a shovel." Someone in the crowd, perhaps feeling a bit of pity for the woman, asked the zookeeper if they could at least give her a shovel to make the task a little easier. The zookeeper's response was firm and without hesitation, "No, absolutely not. Those gloves she's wearing meet the minimum safety requirements, and we see no reason to give her more than the minimum. This is part of her punishment for what she did." The crowd, including us, continued to watch in a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. It was a powerful and uncomfortable reminder of the consequences of cruelty toward animals. The sight of the woman, struggling and retching as she cleaned up the mess with her bare hands, left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. The whole experience was surreal, a strange blend of justice and discomfort that stayed with me long after we left the zoo that day. When I was working in the medical field, I had a profound experience that I still think about to this day. I had been caring for a very kind elderly woman, a patient I visited once or twice a week. She was a lovely soul, but over the years, I had watched her health slowly decline. Despite her struggles, she always managed to keep a warm and gentle demeanor, and I grew quite fond of her. One night, I had a dream about her that felt incredibly vivid and real. In the dream, she appeared to me, looking more vibrant and full of life than I had seen her in a long time. She was dancing, moving with a grace and energy that seemed to defy the years of illness she had endured. As she danced, she called out to me, saying with a joyful smile that she wasn't hurting anymore. It was such a beautiful and uplifting sight to see her so free from pain, and I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness and relief watching her. The dream left me with a deep sense of peace, as if it was more than just a dream, but rather a message or a sign. The next morning, when I got to work, the dream was still fresh in my mind, and I couldn't help but share it with my coworkers. I told them about how she had come to me in the dream, dancing and telling me she was no longer in pain. It felt important to share, even though I didn't fully understand why. Later that morning, we received a call from the woman's daughter. She informed us that her mother had passed away the night before, around the time I had that dream. The news hit me hard, but at the same time, I felt a strange sense of comfort, as if I had been given a glimpse of her transition to peace. I couldn't explain how or why it happened, but I was deeply grateful that I had shared the dream with my coworkers before we received the call. If I had waited until after the news, they might not have believed me, and the experience would have felt less tangible, less real. It was one of the most bizarre yet wonderful experiences I've ever had. To this day, I can't fully explain it, but I am so thankful for that dream. It felt like a final goodbye, a reassurance that she was at peace, free from the pain that had burdened her for so long. That dream gave me a sense of closure and a profound understanding of the connection between life and death, and it's something I'll carry with me forever. One evening, my buddy and I were hanging out at his house, just lounging on the couch and watching TV. At one point, someone on the screen was eating a strawberry, and for some reason, it caught my attention. Normally, I'm not a big fan of strawberries, but the way it looked on the screen made it seem pretty appealing. On a whim, I asked my friend if, by any chance, he had any strawberries in the house. He nearly laughed at the idea. After all, we were 20-year-olds, more likely to have beer, mac and cheese, or Fruit Loops lying around than fresh fruit, especially strawberries. We both chuckled at the thought and went back to watching TV, not giving it another thought. About 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. My friend got up to answer it, and after a moment, he called out to me, telling me to come and check out something. Curious, I went to the door, and there, standing in the doorway, was his mom holding a box full of strawberries, the kind of low-cut box that you see at a farmer's market, overflowing with bright red berries. My friend looked at me with a grin and said, "Tell him what you just told me." His mom looked a little puzzled but started explaining. She said, "I was driving home and saw a guy selling strawberries out of the back of his truck. I don't know why, but I suddenly thought, I bet David and his friends would like some strawberries, so I stopped and bought a box." We both stared at her in disbelief. My buddy couldn't resist and, with a smirk, said, "Well, you blew it, Mom. We each get one wish, and you just wasted yours on strawberries." We all had a good laugh about the whole situation. It was such a bizarre coincidence. What were the odds that just as I had a random craving for strawberries, his mom would get the same thought and show up with exactly what I had wished for? It was one of those moments that sticks with you, a funny, strange little twist of fate that turned an ordinary evening into something memorable. We ended up enjoying those strawberries, not just because they were fresh and delicious, but because of the weird, almost magical way they had come into our lives. Even now, whenever I see strawberries, I can't help but think back to that night and smile at how perfectly everything lined up. One bright, sunny day, I was working in my home office, going about my usual routine. The sunlight was streaming through the window, making it a perfect day to be inside, getting some work done. At some point, I glanced out the window, and what I saw stopped me in my tracks. Moving steadily above the tree line was a large, bright white sphere. It was strikingly round, almost perfectly so, and it looked to be about 4 to 6 feet in diameter. What really caught my attention was the way it moved. It wasn't drifting or bobbing like a balloon caught in the wind. It was gliding at a steady pace, about 20 feet above the treetops. The sphere was a brilliant white, almost dazzling, but it wasn't glowing or emitting light. It had this smooth, almost artificial look to it, as if it was too perfectly shaped to be something natural or even man-made. Despite its appearance, I couldn't see any obvious means of propulsion, no fans, no jets, nothing that would explain how it was moving so precisely through the air. For a moment, I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Sure, it could have been a balloon, but the way it moved was unlike any balloon I'd ever seen. Balloons tend to drift or wobble, especially when they're that high up, affected by the slightest breeze. But this sphere was different. It moved with purpose, in a straight line, without the slightest hint of being pushed by the wind. The sheer roundness of it, combined with its steady, deliberate movement, made it almost look fake, like something out of a science fiction movie. But there it was, right in front of me, as real as the trees it was floating above. I watched it for as long as I could, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it some kind of drone, an experimental aircraft, or just a really unusual balloon? The more I watched, the more questions I had. It didn't fit neatly into any category of things I knew or understood, which only added to the surreal nature of the experience. Even after it disappeared from view, I couldn't shake the image of that strange, white sphere. It lingered in my mind, a puzzle without an answer. I went back to work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that perfectly round object gliding silently above the trees. It was one of those moments where the ordinary day suddenly became extraordinary, leaving me with a sense of wonder and a few more mysteries than I had before.